beneath the surface of history, beyond every map we've ever drawn, lingers a question we can't quite shake. What if some ancient civilizations never actually disappeared? What if they didn't collapse, but stepped back and watched? Imagine powerful societies retreating into the shadows, untouched by time. From ruined temples swallowed by vines to ancient scrolls hinting at sky cities and vast underground worlds, there's no smoking gun, but the signs refuse to stay silent. Strange patterns in the archaeological record, timelines that don't quite line up, cultures that seem to appear out of nowhere, too complex, too fast, technologies that defy the tools of their time, and vanishings so precise they can't be chalked up to war or weather. Could these lost worlds still be hidden today, tucked away in the most remote corners of the earth, buried beneath oceans, sealed, inside uncharted mountains, or lying silent under deserts, waiting? Civilizations that may have once ruled the world and, maybe, in some hidden way, still do. The clues are of salt from the far-off sea and dust from 1,000 lost tales. Somewhere beneath this once glorious city lies the body of a man who attempted to conquer the world and nearly succeeded. Alexander the Great. His name reverberates through history like a story, a man of myth, of ambition, of empire, and despite all the monuments that have been built in his honor, his final resting place has never been discovered. Alexander died in 323 BC in the palace of Nebuchadnezzar in Babylon. His death sent shockwaves through the ancient world, and at the age of 32, no one had anticipated that the man who had marched across continents from the Greek fields to the Indian mountains would fall so quickly and mysteriously. Some speculated that it was a fever, while others whispered that it was poison. But the mystery didn't end there. His generals argued over what to do with his remains. According to historical sources, the funeral procession was stopped before his body could be returned to Macedonia to be buried with his ancestors. Ptolemy, one of Alexander's closest friends, took the body and brought it to Egypt, perhaps for legitimacy, power, or reverence. Ptolemy would go on to establish a dynasty that ruled Egypt for centuries, and having Alexander's body there may have been the key to his success. Stories from the centuries that followed describe a magnificent mausoleum. Some call it the Soma, where Alexander's body was kept. People from all over the world came to pay their respects. Julius Caesar is reported to have sobered in front of the body. Augustus is said to have crowned Alexander with a golden diadem, and Caligula is said to have stolen his breastplate centuries later. The tomb became a symbol of power and legacy of something greater than life, and then the records faded. By the 4th century, Christian and later Islamic influences had altered the region's spiritual map, and no one could pinpoint when or how Alexander's tomb vanished. Was it destroyed in a riot, buried beneath new construction, or buried by the ground during one of the city's frequent earthquakes? For more than a century, archaeologists have looked for it in Alexandria. Numerous sites have been suggested, including beneath contemporary neighborhoods and beneath ancient catacombs, close to the alleged location of the royal quarter. Some point to a building discovered close to Nebi Daniel Mosque, where reports from the 1800s describe a large underground chamber that may have housed a royal figure, but excavation was halted due to political unrest. Others believe that the truth has been buried by urban sprawl and the general chaos of millennia. One theory holds that due to time and neglect, Alexander's body, according to Plutarch and other ancient writers, did not decay and remained uncorrupted for days or weeks. They claimed that this was a sign of divinity, a miracle, or possibly a myth that developed to fit man. However, the questions still stand. Why would the tomb of one of history's greatest figures disappear without a trace? How could a building so revered and visited be forgotten so thoroughly? Why has no one, not even with modern technology, been able to locate it? Maybe the answer lies beneath the marketplaces and apartment complexes of contemporary Alexandria, or maybe the story itself has become too big, layered with centuries of retelling that have warped time until the truth is no longer distinguishable from legend. Nevertheless, there is something enigmatic about the mystery that the conqueror still lies somewhere beneath layers of dust and stone, waiting for his body to remain intact or gone, and that he is a symbol of both power and impermanence. Even the greatest of us can disappear, and that memory itself can be lost. We ask, where is Alexander the Great? And, as we search for him, are we actually seeking a tomb or a fragment of our own lost past? The mists of northern Britain hang low over the rolling moors. Along the West River in northern Germany, cobblestone streets wind past timber-framed houses, and a church bell marks the slow passage of time. It is a picturesque place, peaceful, serene, but here, behind the quaint facades and tourist signs lingers one of the darkest and most haunting legends in European history. On the walls of the town's church, there once stood a chilling inscription in the year 1284, on the day of Saints John and Paul. 130 children born in Hamlet were seduced by a piper, dressed in many colours and lost at the place of execution near the Copan. He played his pipe, and the rats followed him to the river where they drowned. But when the town's people refused to pay, he returned, not for money, but for their children. He played once more, and the children followed, never to return. But behind this familiar folklore lies a deeper, more disturbing truth, one supported by centuries-old records. Stained with the silence of what might have actually occurred, the tale is not merely a fable. The disappearance of the children is mentioned in church registers, town chronicles, and even on stained glass windows dating back to the 14th century. Something did happen in Hamlet, something real, and to this day no one knows exactly what it was. The earliest versions of the event do not mention rats at all. That aspect arrived much later, probably inserted to make the story more palatable or moralistic. Instead, the early accounts speak frankly of a catastrophe, a mass disappearance. Children were taken or lost to community, left in mourning, a memory so painful it was reported that for centuries afterward, no music was allowed on the street. Where the children were last seen, what may have occurred, some historians give a literal interpretation that the children were victims of disease or famine, and the tale of the piper was a symbolic way of processing collective pain. Others proposed that the children were not children in the modern sense, but rather youths, young adults, who may have been recruited or forced into migration. During a period of colonization, around the same time German settlers were moving eastward into regions like Transylvania and Poland, was the piper a real figure, a land agent perhaps, who led the young away with promises of a better life? Another idea speaks of the Children's Crusade, a poorly documented movement about the same era in which thousands of youngsters set off on a holy mission to the Holy Land, many of whom were never seen again. May Hamlin's youth have joined a similar cause, only to be lost to history in regions far from home? There are even darker possibilities. Some have speculated that the children were victims of mass kidnapping, or worse, sold into servitude. Others argued that the entire population may have succumbed to a mass psychogenic disease or religious frenzy. Throughout medieval Europe, the line between vision and crazy was often blurred. A single charismatic figure, a man with a pipe, and a strange coat might have seemed divine, even irresistible. And then there are the more folkloric suggestions that the piper was a symbol of death itself, that the children, perhaps victims of a plague, were led away from the town as part of a ritual separation, buried in a mass grave outside. The town walls, in this interpretation, the piper is not a villain, but a psychop, a guide to the afterlife, some even point to. Geological explanations: could a natural event, an earthquake, a landslide have swallowed part of the population? Or might they have wandered into a cave system, never to emerge? Hamlin lies near limestone terrain, riddled with underground passages. Could the story mask a tragedy lost beneath? The earth, whatever the truth, Hamlin has never forgotten the street where the children were. Last seen, Bungalow Strasse is still marked, and to this day, no music is played there. The town embraces its legend. With festivals and performances, yet behind the pageantry lies something solemn, a recognition that the story is not merely entertainment, but a puzzle one with roots in grief and loss. Why did 130 children vanish? Who or what was the piper? Was he a man, a metaphor, a myth, or all three at once? Centuries have passed, and still the echoes of those vanished footsteps ring. Faintly through Hamlin's narrow alleys, the records are scarce, the answers unknown, but the memory endures, and in that enduring quiet the question grows: what exactly happened in Hamlin on that summer day in 1284? The Sahara stretches outward in all directions, an ocean of Niger River curves through the ancient heart of West Africa, its waters, winding past golden plains, dense forests, and cities that once shimmered with wealth and power along its banks. The great empire of Mali once rose to brilliance, its markets filled with gold, its scholars with knowledge, its rulers with ambition that reached beyond the known world. And among those rulers, one stands apart, not for the riches he brought, but for the mystery he left behind. Mansa Abu Bakari. To the year was about 1311, and Mali was at the height of its splendor. However, instead of controlling his country, Abu Bakari opted to flee it, according to historical accounts, most notably from the great Arab historian A.L. Umari, who documented the testimony of Mansa Musa Abu Bakari undertook not one, but two expeditions into the Atlantic Ocean, determined to reach the limit of the globe. His first fleet, he said, was vast. 200 ships were supposed to have set sail, each laden with food, water, gold, and sailors. Just one returned. The survivors spoke of an endless current, a violent force that pulled the other ships westward into the unknown. They never came back, but Abu Bakari was not deterred. Instead, he prepared a second expedition, larger, grander, and led by himself, according to Mansa Musa, who later became emperor in his place. Abu Bakari abdicated the throne, entrusted the empire to him, and departed with 0 ships, then nothing, no word, no witness, no return. What became of Mansa Abu Bakari too, and his fleet? The question has haunted historians and storytellers for centuries. Some believe the expedition perished at sea, overwhelmed by storms, starvation, or the sheer immensity of the Atlantic in the 14th century even experienced. Navigators lacked accurate instruments, and the ocean was an abyss of uncertainty. The Gulf of Guinea, with its unpredictable currents and powerful undertows, may have claimed them long before they glimpsed new land, but others wonder what if they succeeded. There are those who suggest that Abu Bakari and his fleet may have reached the shores of the Americas long before Columbus ever set sail, some point to oral traditions. In the Caribbean and parts of Central and South America that speak of dark-skinned seafarers arriving from the east, bringing new customs and objects of African origin, a few artifacts, metal, alloys, and plant. Samples have been offered as potential evidence, yet none firmly relate to Mori. In Mexico, paintings at places such as La Venta have generated discussion with their portrayals of people that some claim have African characteristics, linguistic traces, cultural similarities, and old sculptures have all been given as tiny evidence of a lost relationship. Although the scholarly consensus remains wary, much of this evidence is circumstantial, interpretative, or coincidental. No shipwrecks, no clear written records, no unequivocal sign of a West African voyage. Nonetheless, the sheer presence of the story recorded by Alamari only decades after the occurrence gives it weight. Mansa Musa, a man whose word carried global spoke of the voyage as fact, not legend he did not describe. Abu Bakari's disappearance with grief or shame, but with admiration, as if his predecessor had done something noble, something daring. If the expedition did fail, why speak of it at all? Was this voyage an act of madness, or a vision did Abu Bakari seek new lands to conquer, or truths to discover? Was he chasing glory, or fleeing the burdens of rule? And if he did reach another shore, did he live out his days in silence? Cut off from his homeland, remembered only in whispers in Mali oral tradition. Keeps the story alive, some go still, speak of the emperor who sailed into the setting sun, never to return. His fate lost to the waves, others suggest he did return, changed, unrecognizable, transformed by the journey in ways no one could understand. And then there is the symbolism, in a world where most kings fortified their borders. Abu Bakari broke them in an era when the ocean was considered an age. A void he sought as a path. He was a ruler who stepped off the map and into legend, the Niger. Still flows the Atlantic, still waits, and somewhere between the two, in the silence, where history fades into myth, the question lingers, did Mansa Abu Bakari I vanish into failure or into discovery along the Bucento River weaves its way through the city of Cosenza. Its waters are slow, unassuming, and silent, holding no visible trace of the empire-shaking secrets. They are rumored to conceal, yet according to ancient legend, somewhere beneath this very riverbed lies a fortune beyond imagination, a treasure fit for kings, buried not in a tomb of stone, but in the earth itself, hidden forever beneath the flowing current. This is the mystery of all Alaric's treasure. In the year 410, the city of Rome fell to the Visigoths. It was a moment that sent shockwaves through the ancient world. Rome, the eternal city, had stood for centuries as the heart of the Western world, its walls considered impenetrable, but Alaric, the warrior king of the Visigoths, shattered that illusion. He entered the city with his army, and for 3 days, Rome was plundered, its wealth stripped its dignity, damaged gold, silver, magnificent treasures, and holy relics. Others stated that the riches of the Second Temple of Jerusalem, captured centuries before by Titus, were seized, but Alaric's victory was short. Only months later, as he marched his troops southward through the Italian peninsula, seeking access to North Africa, he fell ill. He died suddenly near Cosenza, far from the empire he had defied, and far from the homeland he had long been denied. What happened next has become the stuff of legend. According to accounts first recorded by the historian Jordan in the 6th century, Alaric's warriors sought to bury their king in a manner befitting his greatness. But without inviting desecration, they allegedly diverted the Bucento River, constructed a tomb in the dry riverbed and placed Alaric within it, surrounded by his weapons, his armor, and the unimaginable treasure. Looted from Rome once the tomb was sealed, the waters were allowed to return, erasing all trace of their work to ensure the secrecy of the location. The laborers tasked with the burial were killed, their knowledge extinguished, but was this only myth? Or could it be true? The tale is certainly dramatic. A river diverted by hand, a burial chamber. Constructed in secret, an entire workforce, silenced, but it's not altogether unrealistic that Visigoths were a disciplined force, and the diversion of a river, even temporarily, was not beyond the skills of ancient engineers. The Romans had done it, others had as well, and if any group had the motivation to guard their king's corpse from sacrilege and plunder, it was a displaced people whose leader had delivered them their greatest symbolic triumph for millennia treasure. Seekers, historians, and explorers have theorized about the veracity of Alaric's burial. Many think that the treasure, if it exists, lies under the base NTO, to this day undisturbed. By time the exact location of the grave is unknown and known, physical evidence has ever been recovered in the 19th century German. Poet August von Platen immortalized the tale in verse, fueling renewed interest and romanticizing the idea of the rivers. Hidden secret in more recent times, archaeological interest has increased. Ground-penetrating radar and modern excavation techniques offer tantalizing possibilities, but Italian authorities have been cautious. The river flows through populated areas, and any excavation would risk disrupting local infrastructure and the natural environment. Moreover, without definitive evidence or a specific target, such efforts remain speculative and expensive. Some academics claim that the wealth may never have existed at all. They remind out that the sack of Rome in Fort Len, though historically noteworthy, was not as materially devastating as later. Plundering would be, by the early 5th century, Rome's political and economic power had already eroded. Most of its riches had gone eastward to Constantinople. Possibly the Visigoths grabbed what they could, but not the mythical riches that subsequent myths depict. And yet there are curious coincidences that keep the narrative alive. Bits of items from the Visigothic era have been uncovered in southern Italy, yet none obviously tied to the pillage of Rome. Local legends exist around Cosenza, passed down in whispers and folk tales about buried treasure and a river that once flowed dry. Some believe that Roman Catholic relics looted from churches during the sack may have been among the treasures lost with all. Alaric others go further, linking the tale to the fabled menorah and sacred objects taken from the Second Temple in Jerusalem, which were themselves carried to Rome by the legions of Titus. If these relics were in Rome in 410, and if all Alaric took them, could they still lie beneath? The Bucenta, the enigma, increases when one considers the causes for such a burial. All Alaric was not only a conqueror, he was a Christian, a leader stuck between civilizations, Roman and Gothic pagan and Christian soldier and king. His burial, as described, reflects ancient traditions of sacred monarchy. Maybe it was not just about concealing money, but honoring heritage, a tomb not just of riches, but of identity. Even now, the river runs peacefully through Coata, its surface undisturbed, its depths unfathomable. Underneath it, maybe nothing lays at all, or maybe hidden under layers of silt. And mystery sleeps, a lost time in history, a tomb of gold sealed by silence. Thus, we question, was the treasure of all Alaric real, or was it a tale fashioned to immortalize a warrior king in death, as he had defied an empire in life? In the golden light of North Africa's fading twilight, the ruins of ancient Mauritania repose. Walls worn by time, its turrets throwing long shadows spanning ages of blood and intrigue behind these walls. Monarchy lived and ruled, but also disappeared amid its countless tales. One lingers. More than most, a story of innocence, ambition, betrayal, and silence. The unexplained death of King Edward V. The year was 1483. England was weary, its crown passed too often through violence and war. The boy, King Edward V, only 12 years old, had just inherited the throne after the sudden death of his father Edward. He was young but not unprepared, raised in courtly tradition, schooled in diplomacy, and supported by his mothers. powerful family, Edward was meant to be a symbol of peace in a fractured realm, but fate and power had other plans. As Edward made his way to London for his coronation, his uncle Richard, Duke of Gloucester, intercepted him, citing concerns about the influence of the Queen's relatives. Richard took the child into his care. First stayed in the Bishop's Palace, Edward was quickly transported to the Tower of London, a usual retreat for monarchs awaiting coronation. His younger brother, Richard, Duke of York, joined him shortly afterward, and thereafter they were never seen in public again. At first, their presence was remarked. Servants reported seeing them playing in the gardens, laughing, speaking softly through the windows, but then the sightings stopped. The public waited for word. It never came. Within weeks, Richard, Duke of Gloucester, was crowned King Richard III. The official story was vague. The princes had been declared illegitimate, born of a marriage, claimed to be invalid. Parliament approved the titulus regis, placing Richard on the throne. But what happened of the two little lads? No announcement was made, no funeral was performed, no corpses were retrieved. Rumors spread rapidly, murmurs of murder, of suffocation in the night, of men creeping into the tower under cover of darkness. The names of suspects flew around court circles. Sir James Tyrrell, a loyal retainer to Richard III, is frequently quoted. Some claimed he confessed under torture years later to carrying out the murders on Richard's orders, but the confession was destroyed. No physical evidence was ever produced. Was Richard III truly responsible? Many believe so. The motive was clear. The boys alive posed a threat to his rule. Their bloodline, however, questioned, carried powerful loyalties. Eliminating them would secure the throne, but others dispute this narrative. Richard's supporters contend that he had no need to murder the youngsters because their disappearance benefited others more than him. Henry Tudor, who would become Henry V, had more to gain by the time he claimed the crown at Bosworth in 1485. The princes were already gone. Could he or his allies have had a hand in their fate? Did they remove a future threat to their legitimacy and place the blame on a defeated king? And then there is the possibility that the boys never died at all. Over the years, pretenders surfaced, men claiming to be Richard, the younger prince, having somehow escaped the tower. The most famous, Perkin Warbeck, was even recognized by several European monarchs as the true heir, though eventually captured and executed. His case reignited the mystery. Could one or both of the princes have been smuggled out in secret centuries? Later, in 1674, two small skeletons were discovered beneath a staircase in the tower, buried in a chest. They were believed to be the remains of children, prompting many to assume they had finally found the missing princes. The bones were later interred in Westminster Abbey under the order of King Charles II, but no autopsy or modern analysis was conducted at the time. In the 20th century, a limited examination was performed. The results were inconclusive. The skeletons were incomplete. The ages and sexes of the children could not be firmly established. Requests to subject the remains to DNA testing have been denied by the Church of England. The tomb remains closed. So what became of Edward V? Was he murdered by his uncle, as most Tudor historians claim, or did he die at the hands of those who came after? Was he hidden away in exile, his identity lost to time, or did he perish quietly within the tower, his fate known only to a few, his voice silenced by the political machine that had once crowned him? The Tower of London remains a stronghold of mysteries. Visitors stroll its corridors today, peering into the apartments where kings once lived and died, yet no one knows for certain what happened to the two princes. Their paintings linger in galleries, their names inscribed in history, but their story ends in shadows. A kid, king barely crowned, a brother even younger, a throne stolen or rescued, a stillness that has endured more than 500 years. And so we ask, what exactly occurred behind those frigid stone walls? The wonderful city of Nineveh. At the edge of the ancient Mediterranean world, where the blue waters lapped against marble quays and the scent of incense drifted through colonnaded streets, stood a city that dreamed of knowing everything. Alexandria, founded by Alexander the Great, ruled by the Thames, and shaped by poets, mathematicians, and philosophers. It was once the beating heart of human knowledge, and at its center stood a beacon, not only of light, but of learning. The Library of Alexandria. It was no ordinary collection of scrolls. It was a vision, a place where every text, every fragment, every story, and scientific insight from across the known world would be gathered, studied, copied, and preserved. Built in the 3rd century BC under the reign of Tamii or his successor, the library was part of the larger Mausion, a temple of the Muses where scholars lived, debated, and pursued truth without end. But what did it truly contain? That question has haunted historians for centuries, because while the grandeur of the library is legend, its catalogue is lost. Estimates vary wildly. Some ancient texts suggest it contained 400 scrolls, others estimate as many as 700,000, yet these figures may not represent. Individual title scrolls were fragile, limited in length, frequently split. A single great work can be stretched over many volumes. Nonetheless, the magnitude was vast. The library searched everything: literature from Greece, Egypt, Mesopotamia, India, Persia, even records from lands whose names have faded with time. Works by Homer, Plato, and Aristotle certainly resided there, but so too may have writings that no longer exist in any form. The lost tragedies of Euripides, the entire works of Democritus, whose atomic theories prefigured modern physics, medical treatises from the schools of Hippocrates, and Galen astronomical models from Babylon, mathematical insights that would not resurface for 1,000 years. It is said that ships docking at Alexandria's port were searched, and any scrolls aboard were seized, copied, and placed in the libraries vaults. The originals were often kept while the copies returned to the owner's. Knowledge was treated as a treasure of empire, a resource to be claimed, preserved, and guarded. But if the library was a vessel for the world's wisdom, where is that wisdom now? No definitive list of its holdings survives, no detailed inventory, just scattered fragments, oblique allusions, and tantalizing phrases in subsequent writings. The content of the Library of Alexandria is in many respects the greatest lost book in history. Therefore, what occurred there is no clear solution. The library did not vanish in a single night of fire, as romanticized legends might suggest. Instead, its decline appears to have unfolded gradually across centuries of neglect, war, and shifting political tides. Some point to Julius Caesar's siege of Alexandria in 48 BC. During the conflict, part of the city's harbor and adjoining buildings caught fire. Ancient sources like Plutarch mention the destruction of scrolls, though it's unclear whether this refers to the main library, a satellite collection, or storage facilities associated with the palace, later under the Christianization of the Roman Empire. Intellectual life in Alexandria changed. Pagan institutions were closed, and the famous Serapum, once home to part of the libraries holdings, was destroyed by religious zealots in 391 AD. Some believe this marked the final blow. Others argue that by then the core of the library had already been lost. Even more mysterious is the role of the Arab conquest in 642. Add some later Islamic sources claim that the Caliph Umar ordered the burning of books that contradicted the Quran, but these stories were written centuries after the fact and are likely apocryphal, perhaps intended to dramatize ideological victories rather than record historical truth. Still, the mystery remains. Not just how the library was lost, but what exactly was lost with it. Did the scrolls include maps of the known and unknown world? Did it preserve forgotten languages and cosmologies? Were there accounts of civilizations now erased from the archaeological record did they house? Technological knowledge, hydraulic engineering, medical treatments, astronomical speculations that might have boosted human learning by centuries, and perhaps most fascinating of all, could portions of this collection still exist? Others assume that a few books originally kept in Alexandria remain copied by travelers, maintained by scribes, distributed in monasteries, or incorporated into later Arabic translations. The Temple of Knowledge in Baghdad centuries later reflected Alexandria's ideals. Might it have inherited more than just its spirit? Some say that somewhere under the sands of contemporary Alexandria sealed rooms or hidden stores may still lay in stillness. Waiting to be found, the city has yielded ancient streets. Mosaics even submerged structures along its coastline, but no definitive trace of the library's shelves, scrolls, or reading halls has emerged. What then did the Library of Alexandria truly contain? Was it a lost encyclopedia of ancient science, a treasury of world literature, a sanctuary for human memory? Erased not by flame alone, but by time, empire, and indifference? Or was it always in part a myth, its reality surpassed by the idea? It came to represent the truth. Perhaps lies in the gap between memory and myth, between stone and silence, a treasure not of gold, but of ideas lost not in one cataclysm, but in the slow forgetting of civilizations. And so we wonder, if the Library of Alexandria were to speak again, what would it tell us somewhere along the way? In a peaceful glass display case at the Neues Museum in Berlin, the face of a queen gazes forth across millennia, painted in subtle tones of ochre and rose her cheekbones. High, her eyes lined with precision, her gaze ageless, calm, confident, serene. This is the renowned bust of Nefertiti, one of the most iconic images of ancient Egypt, and yet for all its beauty, it is merely a mask. Her real face, her remains have never been discovered. Nefertiti, the name means the beautiful one, has come, she did, into the heart of one of Egypt's most radical chapters. She was the great royal wife of Pharaoh Akhenaten, who ruled in the mid-4th century BC together. They presided over a religious revolution, replacing the traditional pantheon of gods, with the singular worship of the Aten, the sun disk, at their new capital, Akhenaten, modern-day Amarna. Art-shifted rituals changed and power was redefined. Nefertiti was no passive consort. She appeared beside her husband in official ceremonies, making offerings, wearing crowns usually reserved for kings. In some depictions, she is shown smiting enemies, a gesture once exclusive to male pharaohs. There are even theories she may have ruled in her own right after Akhenaten's death, perhaps under the name Nefertiti, but then she disappears sometime in the later years of Akhenaten's reign. Nefertiti vanishes from the historical record. No clear inscription records her death, no tomb bears her name, no mummy has been positively identified as hers for someone so central to Egypt's 18th dynasty, so vividly portrayed in stone and pigment. Her physical absence is unsettling, so where is she? Many Egyptologists believe she may be buried in the royal necropolis. At Amarna, tombs were constructed quickly during the city's short lifespan, and several contained damaged or erased inscriptions. Could one of these belong to Nefertiti? Could her burial have been hastily arranged after political tides shifted? Others believe she was interred in the Valley of the Kings after the abandonment of Amarna. This notion gained popularity in recent years, when British archaeologist Nicholas Reeves hypothesized that beyond the walls of Tutankhamun's tomb could lay subterranean chambers, one of which, he speculated, might hold the tomb of Nefertiti. Radar scans initially seemed to support the presence of voids behind the north and west walls. The idea was electrifying. that King Tut's tomb was only a front, an annex to a larger royal burial. His mother or stepmother lying just beyond, sealed in silence for over 0 years, yet further investigations were inconclusive. The Egyptian Ministry of Antiquities halted the research. Some scans revealed no chambers existed at all, others were ambiguous, and so the concept remains unproven, unrefuted. Nonetheless, the Valley of the Kings contains additional enticing clues. In 1898, French archaeologist Victor Laurent discovered tomb KV-35, the resting place of Amenhotep II. Within it were 3 mummies relocated there in ancient times. One known as the Younger Lady was found mutilated, her face damaged, her chest violently opened. DNA testing later revealed that she was the mother of Tutankhamun and a full sister to Amenhotep. Could she be Nefertiti? Most scholars deny, because there is no clear inscription tying her to that name. Moreover, the family tie confuses matters. If she were Akhenaten's sister, she could not also be Nefertiti, who was likely of foreign origin, probably Syrian, perhaps from Mitanni royalty. Nevertheless, the misunderstanding speaks volumes. Even with modern genetics, the lines of blood and power in ancient Egypt remain entangled and uncertain. Another candidate lies in tomb KV-21, a skeleton referred to as KV-21A, discovered in a collapsed chamber. She has badly damaged her identity. Obscured, but DNA analysis suggests she may be the mother of one of Tutankhamun's stillborn children. If so, she would have had to be his wife, Ankhesenamun, daughter of Nefertiti. Yet some wonder if the attribution is wrong, and if the skeleton could in fact belong to the elusive queen herself. Beyond these remains, there are more speculative theories. Some suggest that Nefertiti assumed the identity of the mysterious pharaoh Smayankara, who ruled briefly after Akhenaten's death and before Tutankhamun's rise. The evidence is thin, fragmented inscriptions, ambiguous titles, but intriguing. Could Nefertiti have taken on a male persona to preserve the Eternist legacy, or was she erased deliberately by those who came after pharaohs who sought to restore the old gods and destroy all traces of Akhenaten's heresy? And then, of course, there is the possibility that her tomb remains entirely untouched, lost beneath the sands, beneath a private villa in Amman, or hidden behind the walls of a royal chamber waiting to be breached. The absence of her remains is more than just an archaeological puzzle. It is a silence at the heart of a dynasty, a woman who once stood at the pinnacle of power, whose beauty and authority shaped an era vanishes. As if by design, no bones, no sarcophagus, nor orrery texts to guide her to the afterlife. Why was her memory deliberately erased like so many others during the counter-revolution that followed Akhenaten's death? Or was she honored in secrecy, her tomb hidden? To protect it from those who would defile it, did her remains disintegrate in some forgotten grave, or do they lie misidentified in a museum? Drawer labeled with the wrong name. Even today, her bust gazes out across the museum floor, not as a relic, but as a question, a queen without a grave, a life preserved in image, not in body. So we ask again, where is Nefertiti? And if she is ever found, what else might she reveal beneath the sun-baked soils of the Holy Land? And empires clashed under banners of faith and conquest. Whispers began to circulate through medieval Europe of a distant Christian kingdom, hidden beyond deserts and mountains, ruled by a mighty priest-king, a man of wisdom and wealth, whose lands were filled with marvels, whose armies would one day ride to aid Christendom. In its darkest hour, his name was Prester John. For centuries, maps marked his realm in the corners of the world, first in the east, somewhere in India or Central Asia. Then, when hope shifted, in the heart of Africa, always just beyond reach, just beyond proof, a phantom kingdom, drawn in ink and desire. But who was Prester John, and did he ever exist? The legend first surfaced in the 12th century amid the turmoil of the Second Crusade in 1145. A letter reached the court of the Byzantine emperor and later made its way to Pope Eugene III. It was addressed from Presbyter Johannes, a Christian ruler of immense power and piety. In the letter, Prester John described a kingdom rich in gold and precious stones, filled with unicorns and griffins, where rivers ran with jewels, and justice reigned without flaw. He claimed lineage from the three magi. He promised allegiance to Rome and hinted that he would one day march to liberate Jerusalem from Muslim control. The letter was probably definitely a hoax, yet it spread like wildfire, copied, translated, and believed in a Europe split by violence and mistrust. The concept of a hidden Christian friend outside the Muslim world was tempting monarchs, popes, and